Good evening. Welcome to Tompkins Corners Cultural Center. We're happy to bring you a reading from The Dead from James Joyce, The Dubliners, with Peter Gerety, Patricia McGuire, directed by Alice Jankell, and with a special appearance by Tompkins Corners' own Kate Hoekstra. We have several offerings coming up online, which you can find at tompkinscorners.org. And we're preparing for the annual Farmers Market beginning on Friday, June 26th, and every Friday all summer long, following all guidelines for safety and social distancing. One other thing before we begin. We lost a dear friend of Tompkins Corners earlier this year. Susan McCarthy Crawford and her husband Tad have been neighbors and supporters from almost the beginning. Susan, with her long experience helping nonprofits, became our guiding light. She showed us how to be the best community cultural center we could possibly be. We're so grateful for everything she did for us, and we are dedicating this performance to her memory. And now, the year is 1904, and we join the end of a party on a snowy night in Dublin.
If you be the last pilgrim, as I take it you mean to be, then tell me the first token that passed between you and me.
I have never heard you sing so well.
Not honorable for the Pope to turn the women out of the choir.
Well, the best singers.
And little whippersnappers over their heads.
The best singers are in London, Paris, or Rome.
Oh, on the continent.
Jesus. My speech tonight, utter failure. Ridiculous. And had I opened with the Browning, over their heads, surely. Mistake from first to last. And then Miss Ivers, the propagandist. Why should I be ashamed? There's nothing political about writing reviews about books. Calling me a West Briton. I won't be made ridiculous. So I didn't go to the door with the others. I was in a dark part of the hall that was gazing up the staircase. A woman was standing near the top of the first flight in the shadow also. I could not see her face, but I could see the terracotta and salmon pink panels of her skirt, which the shadow made appear black and white. It was Greta. It was my wife.
Don't you remember?
She was leaning on the banister, listening to something. She was so still. What was she listening to? There was a grace and a mystery about her attitude, as if she were a symbol of something. What I asked myself is a woman standing in a staircase in the shadows, listening to distant music. What is it a symbol of? If I were a painter, I would paint her in that attitude. Yeah. The blue felt hat would show off the bronze of her hair. And the dark panels of her skirt would show off the light ones. Distant music. I would call that picture. If I were a painter.
Oh, the rain falls on my heavy hair, the the dew falls on my skin. My babe lies cold within my arms. No one will take us in.
They say we haven't had snow like it for 30 years.
I read in this morning in the newspapers that the snow is general all over Ireland.
I love the look of snow.
Greta was standing right under the dusty fanlight, and the flame of the gas lit up the rich bronze of her hair, which I had seen her drying at the fire a few days before. And I saw that there was color on her cheeks, and her eyes were shining.
What is the name of that song you were singing?
It's called The Lass of Algram. Why, do you know it?
Oh, The Loss of Algram. I couldn't think of the name.
Well, good night, Aunt Kate. Good night, and thanks for the pleasant evening.
Good night, Greta. Good night,
Good night,
Gabriel.
Aunt Julia.
And good night, Aunt Julia.
Good night. Safe home.
Night.
Good
Good
night.
night. Oh, it's cold. Morning was still dark. It was slushy underfoot. Only streaks and patches of snow lay on the roofs, on the parapets of the quay. The lamps are still burning redly in the murky air. Greta was walking on before, her shoes in a brown paper parcel tucked under one arm and her hands holding her skirt up from the slush. Oh, this is so... She was walking on before me so lightly, so erect that I wanted to run after her, catch her by the shoulders and say something foolish and affectionate in her ear. She seemed so frail. I wanted to defend her against something and then be alone with her. Moments of our secret life together burst upon my memory like stars. I wanted to recall to her those moments, to make her forget the years of our dull existence together and remember only our moments of ecstasy. The years that had not quenched my soul or hers. Our children, my writing, her household cares, had not quenched our soul's tender fire. In one letter, I had written to her, "Why is it that these words seem so dull and cold to me? Is it because there is no word tender enough to be your name?" Yeah. I just longed to be alone with her. When we're in the hotel, in the room in the hotel, then I will call her to me. Greta. Perhaps she will not hear at once. She'll be undressing. And then something in my voice might strike her. We were at the corner of Wine Tavern Street, and, well, she leaned lightly on my arm, as lightly as she had danced with me a few hours before. I had felt so proud and happy then, happy that she was mine, proud of her grace. But now, the first touch of her body, musical and strange and perfumed, sent through me a keen pang of lust. I pressed her arm closely to my side. As we stood at the hotel door, I felt that we had escaped from our lives and our duties, and escaped from home and friends, and run away together with wild and radiant hearts. Adventure. At the hotel, there was an old man dozing in a great hooded chair in the hall, the porter. And he lit a candle and went before us up the stairs. "This way, sir." And we followed him in silence, our feet falling, thudding and soft thuds on the thickly carpeted stairs. She mounted the stairs right behind the porter. Her head bowed in the ascent, her frail shoulders curved as if with a burden, her skirt girt tightly around her. Oh, I could have flung my arms about her hips and just held her still. The porter halted on the stairs to settle his guttering candle. We halted too on the steps below him. I could hear, in the silence, I could hear the falling of the molten wax into the tray. I could hear the sound of my own heart thumping against my ribs. And then he led us along a corridor and into a door and asked what time we'd be wanted to be called in the morning. What time would you want to be called? 8, sir. Yeah. He pointed at the tap of the electric light and began a muttered apology. No, we're not wanting any light. We're having enough light from the window, from the street lamp. Yeah. And you might take that fine candle with you when you go, my friend. Porter mumbled a good night, walked out the door. I shut the lock too. A ghostly light from the street lamp lay in a long shaft from one window to the door. I threw my overcoat and hat on a couch and crossed the room toward the window. I looked down into the street in order that my emotion might calm a little. And then I turned and I leaned back against a chest of drawers with my back to the light. Greta had taken off her hat and cloak and was standing before a large swinging mirror, unhooking her waist. I waited for a few moments watching her, and then Greta. She turned away from the mirror slowly and walked along the shaft of light toward me. Her face looked so serious and weary. The words would not pass my lips. No, it was not the moment yet. You look tired.
I am a little.
You don't feel ill or weak.
Oh, no, tired, that's all.
She went to the window, stood there looking out. Why did she seem so abstracted? I did not know how I could begin. Was she annoyed about something? If she would only turn to me or come to me of her own accord, to take her as she is would be brutal. No. I must see some ardor in her eyes first. I was in such a fever of desire, I did not hear her come from the window. She stood before me for an instant, looking at me strangely. And then suddenly raising herself on tiptoe and resting her hands lightly on my shoulders, she kissed me.
You are a very generous person, Gabriel.
I was trembling with delight at her sudden kiss and at the quaintness of her phrase. I put my hands on her hair and I began smoothing it back, scarcely touching it with my fingers. The washing had made it fine and brilliant. Yeah. Just when I was wishing for it, she had come to me of her own accord. Slipping one arm around her body, drawing her toward me, I said, Greta, dear, what are you thinking about? Huh? Tell me what it is, Greta. I think I know. What is the matter? Do I know?
Oh, I'm thinking of that song, the loss of Algarum.
She broke loose from me. She ran to the bed and, throwing her arms across the bed rail, hid her face. I followed her. And as I passed the cheval glass, I caught sight of myself. Oh, full length, my broad, well-filled shirt front, the face whose expression always puzzled me when I saw it in a mirror. What about that song? Why does that make you cry? Why, Greta?
I'm thinking about a person long ago who used to sing that song.
And who was that person long ago?
It was a person that I used to know in Galway when I was living up there with my grandmother.
Someone you were in love with?
It was a young boy I used to know, yes, named Michael Fury. And he used to sing that song, The Loss of Algarum. And he was very delicate. I can see him so plainly. Such eyes he had, such big dark eyes. Such an expression.
Then you are in love with him.
I used to go walking with him when I was in Galway.
Well, perhaps that's why you wanted to go to Galway with that Ivors girl.
What for?
How do I know? To see him, perhaps.
He is dead. He died when he was only 17. Isn't it a terrible thing to die so young as that?
What was he?
He was in the gasworks.
I suppose you were in love with this Michael Fury, Greta?
I was great with him at the time.
And what did he die of so young, Greta? Consumption, was it?
I think he died for me. It was the winter, about the beginning of winter, when I was going to leave my grandmother and come up here for the convent. And he was ill at the time, in his lodgings in Galway, and wouldn't be let out, and his people in Ottagard had written to, and he was in decline, and they said, or something like that. I never rightly knew. Oh, poor fellow. He was very fond of me, and he was such a gentle boy. And we used to go out together walking, you know, Gabriel, the way they do in the country. And he was going to go study singing only for his health. Oh, he had a very good voice. Poor Michael Fury.
Well, and then?
And then when it came time for me to leave Galway and come up to the convent, he was so much worse, and I wouldn't be let to see him, so I wrote him a letter telling him I was going up to Dublin and I would be back in the summer, and hoping that he would be better then. Then that night before I left, I was at my grandmother's house in Nuns Island packing up, and I hear gravel thrown up against my window. The window was so wet I couldn't see, so I ran down the stairs as I was, and I slipped out the back into the garden. There was the poor fellow at the end of the garden, shivering.
Did you not tell him to go back?
implored him to go home at once. I told him he would get his death in the rain, but he said he did not want to live. And I could see his eyes as well, and he was standing at the end of the wall where there was a tree.
And did he go home?
Yes, he went home. And when I was only a week in the convent, he died. And he was buried in Hoekstra, where his people came from. Oh, the day that I heard that he was dead. Oh.
Greta flung herself face downward on the bed. I sat and held her hand for a moment, and then I let it fall gently and walked quietly to the window. She was fast asleep. I watched her for a few moments, her tangled hair and half-open mouth, listening to her deep-drawn breath. So she had had that romance in her life. A man had died for her sake. To think how poor a part I had played in her life. As though she and I had never lived together as man and wife. My eyes rested long upon her face and on her hair, and as I thought of what she must have been then, at that time of her first girlish beauty, I did not like to say even to myself that her face was no longer beautiful, but I knew it was no longer the face for which Michael Fury had braved death. My eyes moved to the chair over which she had thrown some of her clothes. A petticoat string dangled to the floor. One boot stood upright, its limp upper fallen down, the fellow of it on its side. I wondered at my riot of emotions at just an hour before. From what had it proceeded? From what? From my aunt's supper? From my own foolish speech? From the wine and the dancing, the merrymaking when saying goodnight in the hall? The pleasure of the walk along the river? Poor Aunt Julia, she too would soon be a shade. I had caught that haggard look upon her face when she was singing a raid for the bridal. Soon, perhaps, I would be sitting in that same drawing room, dressed in black, my silk hat upon my knees, and the blinds would be drawn down, and Aunt Kate would be sitting beside me, crying, blowing her nose, telling me how Julia had died. And I would cast about in my mind for some words that might console her and would find only lame and useless ones. Yeah. Yes, that would happen very soon. The air of the room chilled my shoulders. I stretched myself cautiously along under the sheets and lay down beside my wife. One by one, we were all becoming shades. Better pass boldly into that other world in the full glory of some passion, then fade and wither dismally with age. I thought of how she who lay beside me had locked in her heart for so many years that image of her lover's eyes when he had told her that he did not wish to live. I had never felt like that towards any woman, but I knew that such a feeling must be love. In the partial darkness, I imagined I saw the form of a young man standing under a dripping tree. Other forms were near. His soul had approached that region where dwell the vast hosts of the dead. He was conscious of, but could not apprehend their wayward and flickering existence. His own identity was fading out into a gray, impalpable world. The solid world itself from which these dead had at one time reared and lived in was dissolving. A few light taps upon the pane made me turn to the window. It had begun to snow again. I watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling against the lamplight. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling on softly upon the bog of Allen, and further westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling too upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Fury lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate and the barren thorns. I heard the snow falling faintly through the universe, and faintly falling like the descent of their last end upon all the living and the dead.
If you be the last of him, as I take it you mean to be, then tell me the last token that passed between you and me.
Thanks, Peter and Trish and Kate and Alice and Cory. Thanks to you for attending our second virtual theater event. You can see all of our virtual events and live programs on our YouTube channel, and you can find out about future events, both virtual and live, at tompkinscorners.org and on our Facebook page. Join our mailing list, and if you'd like to donate to keep us going, that would be greatly appreciated. We hope to see you soon again. Thanks so much. Good evening.